Okay, dear students, good evening. How are you? Yesterday we have left this topic up to the economic impact of the British rule on India. Once again, I am reminding you this is an English medium batch, not English. So I will just seek pardon from those students who just need from me a conversation in Hindi as well. I will try at my best to pronounce certain sentences. So please cooperate with me and don't take it otherwise. My friends, very important thing is that you have to move gradually from information to understanding. And in what way I am teaching you, that is the quite innovative method which I have myself developed through, you can say, through the trial and error method from years, And this is the best method the students from either they are from science background, engineering background, technological or any technical education background, all are equally comfortable in this method, because in this method, basically my objective is to make you a thinking creature. For example, if you are making a study of modern history, earlier also you might have read the topic and you might have read the book on modern history, but there you might have tried there to collect too many informations, too many, you can say, stories or events, whatever might be. But in my method, you can say the basic emphasis is on the change. And for that, I have devised this formula which I have discussed with you earlier. You have divided history in 4 parts: modern history, the history of 18th century, the history of colonialism, the history of nationalism, and finally you can say the history of post-independence era. The history of 18th century you have already finished. Then we have started the history of colonialism. It consists of 3 parts. The first part is the mercantile phase of colonialism, which we have finished, and then we are going across this industrial phase of colonialism, which today we are likely to finish. And today I have provided to you people the study material. मतलब आज आप लोगों को स्टडी मटेरियल मिला होगा, आई एम कॉन्फिडेंट. एंड दिस इज फाइनेंशियल फेज. फाइनेंशियल फेज मीन्स कि दिस इज द लास्ट वन इन colonialism, and then the topic of colonialism would be finished, and after that we are supposed to move to the history of nationalism, and that is the third part which we have to cover. The history of nationalism is slightly a larger part, you can say. So my students, but we always start a class with the 5 questions, and you brilliant students are always doing the right answer. So following the same tradition, today also I have brought 5 questions and you people have to follow it. Question number first: which of the following factors encourage rural indebtedness in 19th century India? मतलब इसमें कौन से ऐसे फैक्टर्स है जिसने रूरल इंडेटेडनेस मतलब ग्रामीण ऋण की समस्या को पैदा किया? Point 1: exorbitant rate of land revenue under the British rule and a very heavy amount of land revenue. Point 2: decline of rural industries. जो ग्रामीण जो दस्तकारी है, इंडस्ट्रीज है, उसका डिक्लाइन. एंड पॉइंट थर्ड: कल्टिवेशन ऑफ कमर्शियल क्रॉप्स. कमर्शियल क्रॉप्स मीन्स की नगदी कैश क्रॉप्स. एंड कोड इज देयर ABCD. Twice A, 1 only, B, 3 only, C, 2 and 3 only, D, 1, 2 and 3 only. Be fast, my friends. Be fast, please. Maximum D. Yes, exorbitant rate of factors encourage rural indebtedness. All the 3 factors are, so choice D is the correct answer. You are absolutely correct, my students. You are correct. Thank you very much. Question number 2. Move fastly. Which of the following factors caused regular famines under the British rule? अब now we have to find out the cause of famines. अकाल मतलब ब्रिटिश शासन के अंतर्गत इतने सारे अकाल क्यों पड़ते थे? व्हाई द फेमाइंस, यू कैन से. पॉइंट 1: हायर असेसमेंट ऑफ लैंड रेवेन्यू मतलब लैंड रेवेन्यू का ज्यादा दर मतलब ज्यादा रेट. to expansion of railways. Expansion of railways. Third, commercial farming. And point 4, decline of handicraft industries. There are the 4 factors, my friends. You people are supposed to do the answer very fastly. Yes, D is the correct answer. What I have told Mr. Ankur, my students are very brilliant students and they are doing the very good answer. Exactly D is the correct answer. Question number 3rd. What changes did British industrial capitalism bring in India during the 19th century? मतलब what changes did British industrial capitalism bring in India during the 19th century? Point 1, acquisition of Indian states. Means ki annexation of Indian states. Acquisition means annexation. Point 2, comprehensive reforms in the administrative structure. मतलब जो प्रशासनिक ढांचे हैं उसमें व्यापक सुधार. और पॉइंट 3rd, प्रमोशन ऑफ कमर्शियल फार्मिंग. मतलब जो कैश क्रॉप्स है, नकदी खेती है, उसको प्रोत्साहन. And there are the choices. Choice A 3 only, B 1 and 3, C 1, 2 and 3, and D 1 and 2. So there are the 4 choices. Choice number C. Yes. Exact. Correct answer. Smart guys, you have chosen the 3 out of 3 correct answer. Matlab, you have done extremely well so far. 2 questions more. Question number 4. Which of the following was the reason behind the decline of textile industry in Bengal during the 19th century? मतलब जो बंगाल में जो कॉटन गुड्स इंडस्ट्री 19th सेंचुरी में उनका डिक्लाइन हुआ है, उसकी वजह क्या है? चॉइस ए, डिक्लाइन इन क्वालिटी ऑफ प्रोडक्ट. चॉइस बी, लैक ऑफ रॉ मटेरियल. चॉइस सी, हायर टैरिफ्स ऑन एक्सपोर्ट्स टू ब्रिटेन. And choice D, lack of artisans. Be fast, my students. Yes, exactly correct. Even the 4th question is the right choice, the correct answer. 4th one question. Question number 5. Which of the following were associated with the tenure of Lord Dalhousie? Which of the following were associated with the tenure of Lord Dalhousie? Point 10, beginning of railway construction. Point number 2, introduction of postal and telegraph services. Point 3, establishment of public works department. Point 4, implementation of Thomsonian system of vernacular education. Thomsonian system of vernacular education. There are the 4 choices. You are supposed to choose the right choice. Choose the right answer. Be fast. My students, here the answer is better to 1, 2, 3 and 4 all. Maybe you are not informed. Here I have to inform you that Lord Dalhousie did a lot of works. Lord Dalhousie is given the credit to have created so many departments, you know. You know he started construction of railways. He created the telegraph department. He created postal department. He also created and constituted the public works department and started the construction of roads and canals on massive scale. मतलब उसने roads और canals को भी काफी बनवाया है. And furthermore, it was during the period of Lord Dalhousie there was the advent of Wood's Dispatch. Wood's Dispatch was a dispatch on education. That was on education. You have, today I will just discuss about the Macaulayan education system. Lord Macaulay. Lord Macaulay, you know, he introduced the so-called English education. Later you can say in 1854, at the time of Lord Dalhousie from Britain, a new dispatch on education came to India that is known as Ut's Dispatch, and it was basically, the Ut's Dispatch was basically the policy decision on the future education in India. So it was called, it is characterized as the Magna Carta. Magna Carta means right. Magna Carta of Indian education. And there you can say what you know as the modern university like Calcutta, Madras and Bombay. So these universities came into existence in 1857. On the same fateful years, the Great Revolt occurred at the recommendation of this Ut's Dispatch, you know. But it was in 1853, during the period of Lord Dalhousie himself, there was the introduction of Thomsonian education as well. Thomsonian education was having the specialty, there was not emphasis over the English education, rather you can say vernacular and Deshi Bhasha. And this was introduced in Punjab, Northwest Province. At that time, Northwest Province was the latter the United Province, what you know as UP, and third one Bengal. So in these regions, the Thomsonian system of education were introduced. So these are the correct, all of the four are the correct choices here, my students. So in this way, my students, maybe about this you are not familiar. Yeah. Oh, this option is should be C. And why? Actually, later it is going to change. Time and again persistently. This is the choice number C. My students, sometime you will find here, suppose here a B and C, so it may create confusion for you, and this is B, but in correct sense it is C, and I think most of you have selected the 1, 2, 3, 4. You are so brilliant, I can very well understand that many students might have selected this choice. But anyway, this is your question answer. Now I am moving to the topic. Economy you have already done, so this one is the society, social reforms. So I have to discuss about the social reforms, and lastly liberalism and utilitarianism. So I have to make you clear. Just 1 minute. Economy is over study, you know, and we have to move that. For example, you can say social policy. About the social policy, I have to inform you. In fact, this is, you might have gone through here. Just 1 minute. Social policy. Social policy. So far the question of English education is concerned, it is up to you whether you are going to classify English education either under social policy or under cultural policy. It was simply a matter of choice for you, because this diagram is simply some sort of indication for you. मतलब जो diagram है वो कोई full and final नहीं है, वो आपके लिए एक indication है कि देखिए जब भी इकोनॉमिक स्ट्रक्चर में ब्रिटिश कॉलोनियल इंटरेस्ट में, ब्रिटिश औपनिवेशिक हित में जब भी कोई चेंज होता है तो उसकी सारे पॉलिसीज बदल जाते हैं. अब फॉर एग्जांपल हियर आई एम आस्किंग यू द क्वेश्चन कि दिस इज द सोशल पॉलिसी. In social policy, you find that the government took initiative for social reforms. My question is social reforms. If we are going to compare this situation with the previous situation at the previous period, or the previous, or you can say the just preceding period, that is called the phase of mercantile phase of colonialism, and try to compare the situation between both the situation, what do you find? During the mercantile phase, the company's government tried to keep itself as much away as possible from social reforms. The company took the little interest in bringing any social reforms during that period. Even Sati was burnt alive, but the company didn't take any serious step to put a check over such, you can say, such a heinous social taboo. But during this period, you can say, this government and the company's government is very enthusiastic in bringing social reforms. What was the reason behind that? So my students, here I will just suggest you better to keep two reasons in your mind. That is better. Two reasons I am making clear. 80% colonial interest. 80% colonial interest. Colonial interest and 20%, although this is the arbitrary division and this division is on arbitrary basis, there is no any scientific basis for 80% and 20%, but it is simply a tentative point and tentative rating. 20% role of ideology. Now suppose you can say that during this period you find a number of legislation for social reforms. For example, the abolition of sati system, the putting a check over the slavery system on the basis of sati system abolition 1829-30, on the basis of the Charter Act of 1833, the slavery system was banned, and with this purpose legislation was done in 1843, you know. Then Widow Remarriage Act in 1856. So a number of social legislation was done by the company's government during this period. So here the question arises, why the government is so enthusiastic? Here, if you are going to ask the same question to any British intellectual, what is the motive behind that? So they will give you a very idealistic picture. We are just searching for the betterment of India. We are just up and doing for making social upliftment in India. We have to perform a civilizing mission and civilize Indians. We have to remove the barbarous social customs in India and so on. These are the idealistic things. It is true that there was the rise of a group of thinkers in Britain at that time. You have observed here in cultural policy the liberal thinker and utilitarian thinkers. So these were definitely, you can say that these thinkers also started to influence the policy towards India, because these thinkers were advocating for change and legislation for social reforms in India. Means it is talking about the government activism for bringing social reforms in India. It is true. But the major factor was that the British were guided by colonial motive. You will ask me, what is colonial motive? The colonial motive was that Indians should be brought from its traditional social moodings, its traditional social structure, because the British were very apprehensive about the fact that if the British are not, if the Indians are not being brought back and just brought outside from its traditional social moodings, the Indians would never accept English education, and only after accepting English education such a generation of Indians would come into existence that will be simply Indian in blood and complexion, but English in taste, temperament and morality, and such generation of Indians would work as a potential market for British manufactured products. मतलब अब कहोगे इसमें कॉलोनियल मोटिव क्या है, तो उनका मानना है कि जब तक इंडियन पीपल को उनके जो परंपरागत जो सोशल स्ट्रक्चर है, इंग्लिश वाले भी थोड़ा समझ लें कि जो उनके जो ट्रेडिशनल सोशल स्ट्रक्चर है उनसे अगर आप बाहर नहीं लाइएगा, तो वैसे सिचुएशन में वे फिर इंग्लिश एजुकेशन को एक्सेप्ट नहीं करेंगे, और इंग्लिश एजुकेशन को एक्सेप्ट नहीं किया तो इसका मतलब है कि आपके यहाँ एक ऐसी इंडियन जनरेशन नहीं आएगा जिसका आकर्षण, जिसका अट्रैक्शन ब्रिटिश प्रोडक्ट्स की तरफ होगा. तो दिस वाज द बेसिक मोटिव बिहाइंड दैट, ब्रिंग इंडिया फ्रॉम द आउटसाइड फ्रॉम द ट्रेडिशनल सोशल मूडिंग, सो दैट कि इंडियंस वुड एक्सेप्ट द इंग्लिश एजुकेशन and then India could work as a potential market for British manufactured goods. So this was the basic objective behind that. My students, you may be clear. Okay, and this point is clear. So my students, this is the basic objective of the social reform. The 80% was the colonial motive, and 20% credit, at least you should give the credit. If British, you will ask a British scholar, he will just give 100% credit to ideological factor, but we are taking ideological factor as द कॉम्प्लीमेंट्री फैक्टर। आप किसी यूरोपियन से ब्रिटिश से पूछोगे भाई वो सोशल रिफॉर्म्स क्यों करना चाहते थे, तो वो कहेंगे कि भाई देखिए हम एक सिविलाइजिंग मिशन को पूरा कर रहे थे, इंडियंस को हम सिविलाइज कर रहे थे, इनके वेलफेयर के लिए काम कर रहे थे, हम बेसिकली व्हाइट्समैन बर्डन है, मतलब ये हम व्हाइट लोगों का दायित्व है। व्हाइट्समैन बर्डन एक थियरी है जो रुडयार्ड किपलिंग ने बहुत बाद में दी है। उसका मतलब है कि हम व्हाइट लोगों का यह दायित्व है कि हम ब्लैक लोगों को सिविलाइज करें। This can be simply a propaganda. This was having some propaganda value, but the actual situation is quite different. It is not the case. It is simply a supplementary factor, and major factor is the British colonial interest. So in this way, you can say social reforms. You have already done, you can say, the social reforms, The ultimate objective behind such reforms was that a reformed Indian society could be a better and stable market for British manufactured goods. British believed that under the influence of social reforms, Indian would accept English education while leaving their traditional outlook behind. This would give birth to a class of brown sahibs, British interests and preferences. Apart from that, another prominent factor, this is all about, you can say, reforms. I have just told you, you might have gone through. The laws were implemented strictly in 1830s to prevent infanticides. The law related to abolition of slavery. These are simply examples. These are facts. Basic objective was to encourage social reforms, activism for social reforms. Then you are observing English education. I mean, English education, what happened, I have to discuss with you. In fact, in 1813, on the basis of the Charter Act of 1813, 1 lakh rupees had to be allocated for promotion of education in India, and particularly the scientific and literary education, and particularly the education in science and literature, on the basis of the Charter Act of 1813. It was at that time a very handsome amount, a very heavy amount, you can say. So how that amount might have been spent, it was the important question. So keeping this purpose in the mind, there was the constituting of, or the creation of, a committee on education, and that was known as Bengal Public Education Committee. This committee was formed in 1823 in order to decide how to spend the money for promotion of education in Bengal, or in India, you can say. So my friends, in this, what you know as Bengal Public Education Committee, there were total 10 members. 5 members were Orientalist and 5 other members were Anglicist. My friends, you are well aware of the fact that what is Orientalism? Orientalism believes in the traditional structure of India, traditional laws of India, and traditional education system in India, And Anglicist believed in the thorough Englishization of India. If India should be given the English education, there should be the English institutions. India should develop on Western model, Western pattern. And Lord Macaulay was a vociferous supporter of, that is Englishization in India, So earlier, before the advent of Lord Macaulay in India, in Public Education Committee, there were total 10 members, and there was almost tie between them, 5 members and 5 members. So, and there was the very controversial issue how to develop the education policy in India, because Orientalists were advocating for the education in Indian classical language. Actually, there was what you know as the Anglicist, Orientalist Anglicist controversy on education. There were 2 issues. What should have been the basis of education, and what should have been the medium of education, and what should be the basis of education, and what should be the medium of instruction. So my students, here point is, on the first issue there was not much difference, because even Orientalists were just come to accept, Orientalists were also just came to, Orientalists were also going to accept that, yes, if you just want to give scientific education to India, that is better. That is okay, not better, okay. But point is that if the scientific education had to be given to India and Indians, so that education should be given in classical language of India, means Sanskrit and Arabic, or at least Persian. Sanskrit and Arabic, or at least Persian, Sanskrit and Persian. Only then the Indians would accept the English education. So this stand was taken by Orientalists. So there was a tie between the two, 5 and 5 members, before the advent of Lord Macaulay. Mr. Ankur is just asking me some question. Possibly some of you have asked me the question, and he's working as a medium of, you can say, exchange between us. So that's why I'm paying attention to me. Mr. Ankur, what is the question? Indian contribution. Actually, what is the name? So actually here I have given a passing reference of social reforms and the legislation for the reforms. So you might be confused कि possibly I have done the social reforms movement in India. That is a very big and vast topic. And this topic I will just cover in nationalism, modern nationalism, very comprehensively about the social reforms, about Raja Ram Mohan Roy, about Dayanand Saraswati, Swami Vivekanand, and many other reformers, you can say, even the women reformers, the lower caste reformers. I deal with them in very details. Here simply I was supposed to give a passing reference कि what was the British motive behind social reforms. मतलब हम आपको यह बताना चाहते थे, यही ब्रिटिशर्स थे जब हम मर्केंटाइल फेज में थे तो ये सोशल रिफॉर्म से अपने को कोसों दूर रखा था, because it was not in the British colonial interest to promote the social reforms in India, because that was not beneficial, and that was basically, that might antagonize Indians. But now the same British were enthusiastic for social reforms. What was the basic motive behind that? 80% colonial interest and 20% ideological factor. So I have mentioned simply, this is simply a concept. So I will talk about the Indian reformers who took initiative, who created the pressure over the British. So that is in the next topic, whenever we will cover the topic of part of nationalism. So this topic would be just covered very comprehensively. So please have patience. No, Anas, I have already made you clear. Rayatwari system was introduced in 2 regions, particularly, Madras and Bombay Presidency, and Mahalwari in northern India, northwest region, and northern India. And Rayatwari covered nearly 51% of the British Indian part, and Mahalwari 30% of British Indian part, and per permanent settlement 90% coverage in the British India. So in this way, I have already studied, I have made this point clear to you. Achha, Lord Dalhousie is the name. Very interesting, Mr. Dalhousie. Many congratulations for me for being Dalhousie. How cultivated? Yeah. Lead to? Oh. Mr. Dalhousie. Actually, whenever I have taught you commercialization of agriculture, I have made you this point clear. Actually, peasants' cash crops, the production of cash crops was an imposed process on Indian peasantry. Indian peasantry did not accept it willingly. And point is that if you are doing the commercial cropping, or you are introducing the cash crops, in that case, the agriculture was going to be a bit costly, because it was the investment oriented. Actually, the peasants were doing investment for commercial crops, but they are not getting outcome due to the very exorbitant of land revenue. And as they were compelled to take the loan from money lenders, so money lenders were charging even the interest. So whatever the commercial products, so these commercial products were almost spent over paying land revenue as well as the interest. So the money lenders could not return the principal money to the peasants could not return the principal money to the money lenders. So they were getting indebted, from where how to feed themselves. So they were taking fresh loan, because it was the quite costly affair. And the you can say outcome of this commercial cropping was not going to peasants. So peasants were deprived from the actual benefit of commercialization of agriculture, and it led to the rural indebtedness. And in case of famine, I have already made you clear, and you people have given the very apt and very good answer. Paramountcy means that the British were making the claim of supremacy over Indian states. The British claim of supremacy on Indian states was called British paramountcy. Portuguese. Actually, Portuguese was at that time. Portuguese was basically had for the abolition of sati. The British played the role, and if Portuguese was in Goa, Portuguese were doing. So basically, Portuguese were just projecting themselves as the representative of European society, and European society was taking such a custom as a bad custom, as a heinous custom. So that's why Portuguese, particularly, he did in Goa. अच्छा, ब्राउन साहिब्स का मतलब है कि द इंग्लिश एजुकेटेड इंडियंस लाइक यू पीपल actually at that time who were gaining English education, so they used to dissociate themselves from common Indians, and they were treating themselves as you can say the Indian elites, and they were English spoken people, so they were sahibs, but as their skin was not white like the British, so they were called brown sahib. And Ashish Nandi is an Indian sociologist. He aptly remarked he was more brown than Sahib. Brown Sahib. Yes, definitely. English education, I will discuss with you later, that English education became instrumental behind the rise of nationalism in future. Today, I will make you clear, if possible, how did colonialism work as an unconscious catalyst behind modernization and the rise of nationalism in India. The intended impact of the British rule was poverty, unemployment, famine, etc. But an intended impact was, development and the rise of nationalism, modernization, etc. It was the after effect or byproduct of the British rule in India, you can say. Orientalists were actually, Shreya, I have told you, you may recall William Jones, Wilkins, Warren Hastings, Calcutta Madrasa, Jonathan Duncan, Sanskrit College, Asiatic Society of Bengal. At that time, a group of British scholars who believed in the supremacy of Indian culture, Indian customs, Indian tradition, and which were taking interest into Indian past and culture, and they believe that Indians should be ruled according to their own tradition. So such group of Indians is known as Orientalists. Okay. So my students, now controversy started between Anglicist and Orientalist finally, but in the meantime, it was William Bentinck. So William Bentinck, at that time, 1833, there was the Charter Act of 1833, and then William Bentinck, actually after the Charter Act of 1833, just was introduced at the time of the William Bentinck. And in Charter Act of 1833, there was a provision for a law member. I have told you earlier, where the law member Lord Macaulay was appointed. And Macaulay was what? Macaulay was thoroughly, westernized. When he was basically Anglicist. And William Bentinck appointed Lord Macaulay on the post of the president of the Bengal Public Education Committee in 1834. So once Lord Macaulay was appointed, then obviously you can say the balance just swung in favor of Anglicist from Orientalist, because now the Lord Macaulay was the president or chairperson of this Public Education Committee, and then Lord Macaulay completely favored the English education in India. He even made a very hyperbolic statement at that time, very exaggerated claim, मैंने बहुत अतिशयोक्तिपूर्ण बातें उसने कही. उसने कहा, in fact, one shelf in an almirah in any library of Europe, the books which have been kept and the books which were kept in a single shelf in one almirah in any library in Europe was much prosperous than the whole Sanskrit and Arabic literature in India. Can you believe that? How could Lord Macaulay make such a claim? Because Lord Macaulay was not having the knowledge of either Sanskrit literature or Arabic literature, but he made such a hyperbolic claim, you can say. मतलब ऐसा क्लेम करना कहाँ तक जस्टिफाइड था, आप ही बताइए कि अरबिक लिटरेचर और संस्कृत लिटरेचर का टोटल जितना रिसोर्सेस है उसमें एक सेल्फ भर यूरोप के किसी लाइब्रेरी के, किसी अलमीरे की एक सेल्फ की बुक्स उससे ज़्यादा है. तो सच ए क्लेम वॉज मेड बाय लॉर्ड मैकाले, यू नो. एंड on 2nd February 1835, he introduced the famous Macaulay Minute. What was the provision of Macaulay Minute? I have told you after this Anglicist and Orientalist dispute, you can say. So here you find there is the term, it has been given, downward filtration theory. But it was supposed that a handful of Indians would be given English education. A handful of, just say you are talking about the English education. So here you can see in English education, firstly just discuss what is Orientalist, Anglicist controversy, which I have made you clear. It is the first issue. How was it solved? And what was downward filtration theory. This was solved in favor of English education. On 2nd February 1834, Macaulay Minute was introduced, and it was declared that a handful of Indians would get the knowledge of modern Western science on the basis of Western science and literature on the basis of English education, and then this handful of Indians would work as a translator, and they will just carry this knowledge to the masses, to the common people in vernacular languages. So that was called downward filtration, from up to down. Meaning a handful of Indians would gain the knowledge of the Western science and literature, and then they will percolate the ideas to the common masses. So in this way you can say the idea will percolate to common masses. मतलब ये common masses में filter होकर आएगा. So that is called downward filtration theory, because ये filter होकर नीचे तक आएगा. But can you believe that कि once a handful of Indians they got the English education, so after that did they prefer to mix with the common people? Never. They themselves became the brown sahibs, you know. They themselves became the elite, so they didn't mix with the common people. The downward filtration theory was a complete failure. Now the question is, why? What were the objectives? Objectives behind Macaulay Minute. Macaulay had just, you can say, introduced this system. The question arises ki what was the objectives behind that? Means ki what was the purpose? So first purpose was to create a generation of Indians which would have been simply Indian in blood and complexion, but British in taste, temperament and morality. So such generation of Indians would work as a market for British manufactured goods. तो कहीं ना कहीं देखो इंडस्ट्रियल कैपिटलिज्म है माय स्टूडेंट्स, तो मार्केट तो हमेशा रहेगा, मार्केट को आप इग्नोर नहीं कर पाओगे. सेकेंड वन फैक्टर, व्हाट इज द सेकेंड वन फैक्टर? जस्ट इमेजिन. तो सेकेंड वन फैक्टर वाज टू इनेबल Indians for working on lower post, because Indians might have been much cheaper than the Europeans and the British. Now, can you say that the higher post was already filled by Europeans and the Britishers, But what about on the junior post? On junior post, you can say the Europeans and the Britishers were not available in such a large number, and they were very costly because they needed a very higher salary. So Indians could have been filled on the post at cheaper rate. So this was the second one purpose. Third one purpose, in fact, the father of Lord Macaulay was Zachary, his name was, and he was a very dedicated Christian. So he was also having the objective that there should have been the wider expand of Christianity in the world. So Lord Macaulay just promised his father, if this English education would be enforced strictly, so I am confident about the fact that within 30 years in Bengal there would be no idolaters. मतलब कि पूरे 30 years में बंगाल में कोई मूर्ति पूजा करने वाला नहीं बचेगा, मीन्स कि ऑल वुड बी कन्वर्टेड इनटू एज क्रिश्चियंस. तो कहीं ना कहीं यहाँ कॉज ऑफ क्रिश्चियनिटी भी है. एंड फोर्थ वन फैक्टर, एज शेखर बंदोपाध्याय हैज हाईलाइटेड, in fact through English education there could have been the rise of a generation of Indians which could have been very friendly, and they would just look to the British as the big brother. Actually the British could have been, or a generation of Indians or the English educated Indians might have been bonded with the British, or you can say just some English educated Indians could have been linked to the British through filial bond, माने भाईचारे या बंधुता की भावना में वो ब्रिटिश के साथ बंध जाते. तो नॉर्मली यू कैन से कि दीज आर द फैक्टर्स. अब क्वेश्चन अराइजेस, इंग्लिश एजुकेशन इज हैविंग बेनिफिट फॉर इंडिया. व्हाट इज बेनिफिट? तो माय स्टूडेंट्स, वी डोंट सर्च लार्जर बेनिफिट्स. Benefits are very limited, One benefit was that it is true that a handful of Indians got the English education. But it is equally true that through English education, they came in touch with the Western liberal and nationalist ideas. And later, it was the English educated people which could work as the social basis for future nationalism in India. यही जो इंग्लिश एजुकेटेड लोग थे, उन्होंने ही आगे चलकर इंडिया में मॉडर्न नेशनलिज्म के एवोल्यूशन में काम किया. दिस इज द ट्रेडिशनल. So far as myself was a student, so I was simply taking the single one factor, my student. But you will be surprised to know that the second one factor was added later, after 1990s. What you know as the era of economic liberalization and globalization. So in the era of economic liberalization and globalization, the second one factor has also been added. What is the second one factor? In fact, India could move on the path of, you can say India could move fastly on the traffic of, through the traffic of, the software technology. If India could excel in the software technology, and it is one of the factors was the larger availability of English educated people in India, because the English educated engineers could work on computer software and India could excel in this field. You can say why not other country? For example, in China just promoted the mother tongue Chinese. So like many other countries, Japan Japanese, but Indians English. So India is owning presently, you can say the largest number of English graduates in the world, So on call center, on many other things. So India was largely benefited from this outsourcing, which became a common feature after economic liberalization. So it is due to the English education. So my students, in this way you can prove it. So this is the beneficial part. But benefit of English education, the two benefits I have discussed with you, and thus you can say detrimental impact. मतलब इंग्लिश एजुकेशन से नुकसान क्या हुआ? डेट्रीमेंटल इम्पैक्ट मतलब नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट ऑफ इंग्लिश एजुकेशन. So detrimental impact of English education, this negative impact was much larger than positive impact. The first one thing you can say, as downward filtration theory failed, a handful of Indians would get scientific education of science and literature, and then they pass the education to the common people. So this method completely failed. So it resulted into the breakdown of English, you can say, public education system in India. A public education system in India. My claim is actually, actually British are making the claim that we have educated India, we have gave India the English education, but someone should ask him, it is true you have given the English education to 0.5% or maximum 1% people of India, but you have deprived 90% of Indians from education, as you have, you can say, broke down the public education system in India. And we felt the pinch of the British policy even today, you can say. At the time of independence, we are simply having the 16% of literacy at that time, at the time of independence. And even today, we could not reach up to 100% literacy rate. For that, simply British are not accountable. Even our slackness is largely accountable for that. But it is equally true that British broke the English education system, public education system in India. And in 2001, we introduced the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. In 2009, we introduced the, right to education. But we cannot reach even today up to the 100% literacy standard. So this is the limitation of English education, you can say. Limitation of English education. Second one thing, there is a deep cleavage within Indian society between India and Bharat. You people, English educated people, are representing the, you can say, tinge of India. And a large number of people, even today you find Bharat. Bharat means ki Hindi spoken people, Bharat, and English spoken people, India. So there is division between India and Bharat. आज भी आप देखिए एजुकेशन सिस्टम में जो हिंदी मीडियम वाले हैं, इंग्लिश मीडियम वाले हैं, हमारे जो इंग्लिश मीडियम वाले भाई हैं वो हम पर गुस्सा करते हैं क्योंकि वो आधा इंडियन है, आधा भारतीय है. So this is the division of, अब एक लैंग्वेज रहता, there could not have been a problem. अगर one major language, for example, in England, the mother tongue is English, and even official language is English. In France, the mother tongue is French, or official language is French. Even in India, this could have been the English could have been the mother tongue, and the English could have been the French. Even though that was a sort of consolation. So my point is that this sort of division emerged in India, and this division continued till today, and it is not possible to, you can say, make Hindi as official language, because a large part of India is still, that is not the English Hindi spoken people. So considering the national interest, English was accepted as the supporting official language in India, which I will discuss in course of nation building, the post-independence era. We are a very unique nation. We have created a nation in a very unique way. We cannot follow the method of nation building of Western countries, because we are having the larger challenge in nation building than the Western countries, you can say. So, my students, this is the second one. Third one factor was that in this English education system, the most of the original research was done in Britain, and India and Indians were simply supposed to imitate them, imitate the research, nothing more than that. And we became simply imitator, and original ideas were devised in Britain. So in English education, we became their poor second. We were not as on the equal standard with the British people or the English people in England, So these are the certain weaknesses, and they have taught us mainly literature and philosophy. In spite of introduction of English, they could not give us the proper scientific knowledge or scientific education. So that is also a major problem. So in this way, you can say both. So these are the detrimental impact of English education. Yes. Indians, both are the factors. My students, Indians became conscious about social reforms due to the English education. It is true. and Indians became more conscious about social reforms, when the British started legislation. And my students, you are in the second phase. Today, I have provided you the study material in the third phase, that is, financial phase. So I will, there also I have given the same diagram. You will observe there in social field, learning the lesson from the Great Revolt of 1857, British became scared, and then the British avoided, bringing reforms in India, social reforms in India after 1858. And if they could take initiative for bringing reforms in India, so the initiative was simply taken on the Indian pressure or pressure of Indian reformers, but not during this phase. During this phase, the British were themselves enthusiastic for bringing the reforms, and the Indian reformers were working as the catalyst behind that. This is also a factor, and it is equally true even the British legislation worked as a catalyst for Indian reformers. The British legislation शुरू किया और ब्रिटिश ने कॉन्शसनेस दिखाया, तो इंडियन जो रिफॉर्मर्स थे वो भी थोड़ा इंथुजियास्टिक ज्यादा हो गए रिफॉर्म्स के लिए, ये भी बात है. It is very simple. Sati was banned in any form, and that became a penal offense to continue it. Yeah? What is the who? Pramod, Sati Regulation Act of 1829 is, in fact, on the basis of the 17th article of this Bengal regulation, there was the abolition of Sati system, and it became a penal offense. If someone is going to carry this offense, so then he might have been penalized. It was banned, and he took a very courageous step, you can say. It was a dispatch on Indian education. The Wood's dispatch actually came in 1854, and Wood's dispatch, Wood was basically the head of the board of control, Charles Wood. So under him, this dispatch came to India, and it became the basis for the future education. So it is called the Magna Carta of English education in India. Wood's dispatch appeared in 1854, at the time of Lord Dalhousie. According to the dispatch, there should have been the there should have been the education and the use of languages at three different levels. At primary education, at the level of primary education, the vernacular language should have been used. At secondary education, the vernacular language and English language both should have been equally in use. And on higher education, simply English was the medium of education. Wood's dispatch rejected downward filtration theory. Downward filtration theory it rejected, and it recommended for creation of education department in certain provinces, 5 provinces, and it also recommended for teachers training. It recommended for the formation of universities in India on the pattern of Oxford University. So it was at the recommendation of Wood's dispatch, there was the foundation of universities Calcutta, Madras and Bombay in 1857. So this is the recommendation of Wood's dispatch. At that time, the Hindi was not so developed. Sanskrit was the classical language of India, and Hindi language was simply taking the shape. It was the language of the common people. At that time, there was not the, you can say, formation of Sanskrit grammar. It was not the standard language at that time. Sanskrit was standardized by Mahavir Prasad Dwivedi in early 20th century, you can say. So Sanskrit was Hindi was standardized later. It was not the standard language at that time. That was Holt-Mackenzie. I have told you that the experiment was done by Holt-Mackenzie. Anand, your question is who brought Mahalwari system? So first experiment was done by Holt-Mackenzie. I have told you. डाउनवर्ड फिल्ट्रेशन थियरी मीन्स, उनका ये कहना था, मैं हिंदी में बोल देता हूँ शायद इसलिए इंग्लिश वाले को कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं होगा. मैं मानता हूं कि मैंने इंग्लिश में उनको समझा ही दिया है, और मुझे लगता है कि इनको हिंदी में इंग्लिश में दिक्कत होगी, इसलिए तो आई एम मेकिंग यू क्लियर। देखो, डाउनवर्ड फिल्ट्रेशन थियरी का ये है कि पहले ए हैंडफुल ऑफ इंडियंस, मतलब हैंडफुल ऑफ इंडियंस का मतलब है कि अब इंग्लिश में तो इतने सारे लोगों को एजुकेशन दे नहीं सकते थे, तो वो उन्होंने कहा कि हम इंग्लिश में पहले कुछ लोगों को मॉडर्न साइंस का और लिटरेचर का हम एजुकेशन देंगे, और वो जो हैंडफुल ऑफ इंडियंस है, वो हैंडफुल ऑफ मतलब एक ग्रुप ऑफ इंडियंस, जो कुछ इंडियंस हैं, वो फिर वही ज्ञान को, वही नॉलेज को इंडियन लैंग्वेजेज में कॉमन पीपल तक पहुंचाएंगे, तो फिल्टर होकर ऊपर से नीचे आएगा। सो दैट वाज कॉल्ड डाउनवर्ड फिल्ट्रेशन थियरी। वंस अगेन मे बी यू आस्क मी इन इंग्लिश, so I am repeating in English. I am not clear whether you are asking me in Hindi or English. Actually, a handful of Indians will get the English education. Sorry, a handful of Indians would get the knowledge of modern science, European science and literature through English, and then they will make this knowledge percolate to the masses in vernacular language. So they would effectively work as a translator. This is known as downward filtration theory. Okay. Now, my friends, the last is basically an ideological theory, and that is, you know, Macaulay education policy, and then contributions, liberalism and utilitarianism. Of what is liberalism and utilitarianism? Actually, here I have to make you clear, basically what you know as liberalism and utilitarianism. So this is basically an ideology. यूटिलिटेरियनिज्म, लिबरलिज्म को हिंदी में बोलते हैं उदारवाद, यूटिलिटेरियनिज्म को उपयोगितावाद। तो बेसिकली दे वर द प्रोडक्ट ऑफ द इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन इन ब्रिटेन, एंड a group of thinkers in Britain, they were known as liberals and utilitarians. Sometimes liberal and utilitarians are just used as synonym for each other. मतलब कभी कभी liberal और utilitarian शब्द का प्रयोग एक दूसरे के बदले होता है, but if you will observe minutely, you will find that even there was some difference between the liberal and utilitarian thinkers. Here I have to make you clear. For example, here I have in your study material, I have given the point of similarity and difference. So here I have to make you clear. So just observe here. Both were products of industrial revolution in Britain. मतलब liberal thinkers and utilitarian thinkers, both were the product of industrial revolution in Britain, you know. Point two, both were staunch critics of Orientalist ideology. Both were staunch critics of Orientalist ideology, as they believed that Orientalists had done undue praise of India. In fact, earlier you have already, you know, Orientalist thinkers. So Orientalist thinkers believed in traditionalism. They believed in the study of Indian past and culture. They believed that Indians should be ruled according to their own custom and tradition. But this such a statement or such perception was disturbing to liberals and utilitarians both. इनका मानना था कि भाई ये जो ओरिएंटलिस्ट है वो दकियानुसी विचार रख रहे हैं. दे आर बेसिकली हैविंग द पैरोकियल अप्रोच एंड दे आर बेसिकली सफरिंग फ्रॉम इंडोमैनिया. मतलब वो इंडिया की बहुत ज़्यादा तारीफ करते हैं, परंतु इंडिया उस लायक है नहीं. इंडिया एंड पास्ट एंड कल्चर आर रिग्रेसिव, ये प्रगतिहीन है. इंडियन पास्ट एंड कल्चर आर नॉट प्रोग्रेसिव, दे आर रिग्रेसिव, दे आर डिक्लाइनिंग, they need reforms. मतलब we are supposed to do reforms in Indian past and culture, and we have to make changes in Indian tradition, Indian customs, etc. because they are barbarous, they are uncivilized. इस तरह से इन्होंने लिबरल्स और यूटिलिटेरियंस ने इंडिया को डिग्रेड किया, इंडियन पास्ट एंड कल्चर को डिग्रेड किया. ठीक ये ओरिएंटलिस्ट के ठीक विपरीत, उसके ठीक रिवर्स जा रहे थे. Both were staunch critics of Orientalist ideology, as they believed that Orientalists had done undue praise of India. Both perpetuated the myth of a regressive Indian society and a culture in decline. While putting forward the need to civilize Indians and take them on the path of development, they justified the presence of a strong British rule over India. अब differences, अब देखो कॉमन पॉइंट्स तो है कि दोनों इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन के प्रोडक्ट हैं, बोथ आर अपोज इक्वली यू कैन से एलर्जिक टू ओरिएंटलिस्ट थिंकिंग, both believe that India needed Indian past and culture regressive and they needed reforms, and the British would have taken the initiative for social legislation for carrying reforms in India. So these are the common point, but point of differences are also there. What are the point of differences? Point one, the liberals believe that though India was currently passing through a phase of decline, but through English education and British political institutions, it could be taken on the path of development. In India, this view was represented by Lord Macaulay and Trevelyan. But on the other hand, utilitarians like Jeremy Bentham rejected this view and emphasized that Indians could never proceed towards the path of development on their own. Thus, the British government in India should act as a schoolmaster and encourage development in India through good governance. My students, here I am making it. Actually, liberals and utilitarians were having certain point of difference as well. The liberals believe that if in India there would be the foundation of English institutions, and if Indians are given the English education, so civilizing mission would be completed and Indians could move on the path of progress. Indians could move on the path of progress themselves. So this view was given by liberals like Macaulay and Trevelyan, but utilitarians were a bit hardliner. They believed no. Indians could never progress on their own because Indians were by born, they were regressive. They were not having internal strength to carry the progress themselves. So India needed the British initiative for carrying reforms in India. The British had to play the role of a schoolmaster. The British had to play the role of a schoolmaster. So India had to move on the path of progress, and the British had to play the role of schoolmaster, and the British had to work as a major catalyst behind carrying the progressive reforms in India. So in this way, they try to prove that India needed the British support, the utilitarians. मतलब सम टोटल मैं आपको बताऊं, लिबरल्स कहते थे इंडिया को अगर हम ब्रिटिश इंस्टीट्यूशन माने ब्रिटिश संस्थाओं की स्थापना करते हैं और इंग्लिश एजुकेशन अगर इंडियंस को दे देते हैं तो इंडियंस खुद प्रोग्रेस की तरफ बढ़ जाएंगे. यूटिलिटेरियंस कहते थे ऐसी भूल मत, मतलब ऐसी गलतफहमी में मत रहिए. यू हैव नॉट टू हैव सच ए रॉन्ग नोशन. यू आर ए रॉन्ग हैविंग ए रॉन्ग नोशन. इंडियन में कैपेसिटी है ही नहीं. ब्रिटिश को एक स्कूल मास्टर की भूमिका निभानी चाहिए और स्टिक लेकर, छड़ी लेकर, पीट कर इनको सुधारना चाहिए. ये इनका है बेसिक थियरी. Second one, the liberals believe that a time would come in future when Indians would get independence by moving on the path of development. However, the utilitarians, while rejecting this view, emphasized that the British on behalf of the Indians would always be there to promote development for Indians. They also believed that the need of Indians was not freedom, but happiness, which could be provided only through an effective and competent government. Thus, it was only the British government which could bring happiness to Indians. My student, this is another statement here, Actually, liberals, they were a bit enthusiastic. They were a bit enthusiastic and a streak of enthusiasm. They even made the statement, if you will introduce the English education and English institutions in India, the Indians would themselves move on the path of progress, and a time will come even they get independence, or they can get freedom. तो यूटिलिटेरियंस को लगा कि भाई ये तो बहुत ज्यादा बोल गया. इट हैज गिवन अ वेरी हाइपरबोलिक स्टेटमेंट. देन इंडियंस वुड बी मोर सेल्फ कॉन्फिडेंट एंड देन द रेलिवेंस ऑफ द ब्रिटिश रूल would end in India because Indians are having such a capacity. He told no. Why are you talking about freedom? Indians needed not freedom. India needed the better government or efficient government. because Indians want happiness, and we can give them the happiness through better government. Indians did not want freedom. Indians wanted happiness. You might have heard the statement of Jeremy Bentham. The objective of the British rule should be the greatest happiness to the greatest number. तो happiness बोलते हैं, the greatest happiness. Indians needed happiness, and we will provide them through the efficient government. They needed not freedom. The liberals believe that the objective of British rule in India must to civilize Indians, but the utilitarians rejected this view by negating the possibility of Indians becoming cultured and capable of self-governance. मतलब अब liberals were talking about the civilizing mission कि through English education we have to civilize India, but utilitarians tried to establish that कि no, you are having a wrong notion. Indians are inborn uncivilized. They could never be civilized. So better to give them the better governance yourself. It is quite futile to work for their civilizing mission. So in fact, utilitarians even oppose the English education in India. So this is the difference between the liberals and utilitarians, you know. So my friends, you may be a bit clear. मैंने इनका कहना था कि भाई सिविलाइजिंग मिशन की आप बात कर रहे हो, और इंडियंस कभी सिविलाइज नहीं हो सकते हैं. इंडियंस को आप अपने ऊपर छोड़ दो और खुद उनकी तरफ से आप कुछ कर सकते हो तो करो, क्योंकि उनमें कैपेसिटी नहीं है कि कर सकते हैं. तो कुल मिलाकर आपने क्या देखा, यूटिलिटेरियंस थोड़ा और भी हार्ड लाइनर है लिबरल्स से. यही फर्क है यूटिलिटेरियंस और लिबरल्स में. दिस इज द पॉइंट ऑफ डिफरेंस बिटवीन द टू. So my students, you may be clear. Can I hope? Because you are the brilliant students and you are doing the question in the better manner. Up some model answers I have given to you. You people have to do at your own. The British industrial capitalism not only exploited Indian economy, but also guided changes in the socio-cultural aspects of Indian life. Comment. So you have to go through the model answer yourself. My students, Charter Act of 1813. So I have provisions I have already given to you, might have gone. In Charter Act of 1813, this is not important from the mains point of view, simply from PT point of view. And here I am giving you the guideline ki what you are supposed to recall in Charter Act of 1813. Rest of the thing you have to go through it yourself. First of all, Charter Act of 1813 opened just abolished the trade monopoly of East India Company, and Indian market was open for British manufactured goods. Although the British were still enjoying the monopoly in trade in China and the tea trade, but the Indian trade monopoly was completely abolished. Okay. And the second one provision from Prince's point of view is that in the Charter Act of 1813 there was a provision for promotion of English education and promotion of education of modern science and literature in India, and for that 1 lakh rupees had to be allocated for promotion of education in 1813, Charter Act of 1813. So keep simply two provisions in your mind, everything you can ignore. In Charter Act of 1833, so it carried further the, you can say, objective of the Charter Act of 1813, because Charter Act of 1813 already dismantled the trade monopoly of the British company, but the British company was still, you can say, East India Company was still enjoying its trade monopoly in China and tea trade. So Charter Act of 1833 even abolished that. One important thing even in Charter Act of 1813 I have to make you recall. In fact, Charter Act abolished the trade monopoly, but the British company was given the right to administer India, means कि the right to administer India. Administer India means कि भारत में शासन करने का अधिकार for the rest of 20 years. Means कि the British company had to work as an administrator for rest of the 20 years. In Charter Act of 1830 up to 1833, the time period has already lapsed. So once again, the right of administering in India, the British company was given the further 20 years lease. Means कि the British company had to work as an administrator for the rest of the 20 years. So this was the provision of Charter Act of 1833. And the second one provision of the Charter Act of 1833, you can see, actually there was, in the Viceroy Council, because now the Bengal was given the right to carry legislation. Legislation means ki Vidhi Nirman. Carry the legislation for Madras and Bombay as well. And for legislation work, the legislation work was done by the Viceroy in Council. So as the Viceroy Council was having the legislating work for Madras and Bombay as well, so that's why a fourth member had to be inserted. Where the fourth member was the law member, and that was Lord Macaulay. I have told you earlier. And one important thing, as Madras and Bombay were subordinated to Bengal due to the legislation work, so that's why now the Governor General of Bengal came to be characterized as Governor General of India. If someone is going to ask you who was the first Governor General of India, you will refer the name of Lord Macaulay. You will prefer the name of William Bentinck. William Bentinck was the first Governor General of India and the last Governor General of Bengal also. He was the William Bentinck, So William Bentinck was the first Governor General of India. And one more provision you can say it was also declared that Indians would not be discriminated against in government services on the basis of caste, birth, race, etc. Under this act, there was a provision for abolition of slavery in India. Means this Charter Act of 1833 also recommended the abolition of slavery in India, and with this purpose, the legislation was done and slavery was abolished in 1843 during tenure of Lord Ellenborough. It was also declared that Indians would not be discriminated. And now Charter Act of 1853. Simply keep one thing in your mind. In Charter Act of 1833, the East India Company was given the further lease of administration for the next 20 years. But in 1853 Charter Act, the British company was given the right to administer India, or the administrative rights for India, only for a temporary period, not 20 years. My students, that's why it became for the British Crown to abolish the administration of British company in India and to make a takeover the administration of India directly into the hand of the Crown. If there could not have been such a provision, for example, temporary period, then the British Crown had to wait for making a takeover of the administration for the rest of the 20 years till 1873. But it was not the case, In 1858 itself, it has made a takeover after that. And the second provision, the important provision is civil services. In civil services, that competitive exam was introduced in civil services for the first time during this period. Competitive exam in civil services was introduced for the first time during this period, So that's why these are the important provisions of this industrial phase has been finished. My students, I am giving you one question as the homework. Are you ready for that? Just I am writing the question for you people. Lord Dalhousie was the maker of modern India. Elaborate. Elaborate the statement. Elaborate the statement. And here you can see Lord Dalhousie was the maker of modern India. Elaborate the statement. And that is, UPSC 2013. This was the question. Mr. Ankur just ask my students, are they in a position to answer this question or do they need some help? Firstly, ask them. This would make this point clear whether this question is a hypothetical question or argumentative question. Firstly, please, my students, if you hear my voice, that is must, and you must hear my voice, you know. So please answer my question, all of you. Are you in a position to, first of all, make me clear, which type of a statement is this? Whether this statement is hypothetical or argumentative. What do they say? Right, very good. My students, I am a bit surprised. In 2013, the question was asked by UPSC, and in this question, they have made a hypothetical statement. This point is clear that this statement could have been a critical statement. Suppose in place of elaborate, you might have found the term criticize the statement or make a critical review of the statement or criticize the statement. If you may find the view, you criticize the statement, was the different or not? The second one, actually whenever you will go through a question, a statement is called the topic statement, and what is the last? Is elaborate the statement or criticize the statement. So for that there is the use of the term directory. It is directory. So do you know, if there is the same statement but directory is different, तो मीनिंग ऑफ स्टेटमेंट इज गोइंग टू चेंज. मतलब आप अगर कोई भी क्वेश्चन देखोगे उसमें दो पार्ट होता है. एक होता है जो स्टेटमेंट होता है, उसको बोलते हैं टॉपिक स्टेटमेंट, और जो उसके पीछे जिसको टेल पार्ट कहते हो क्वेश्चन का, वो टेल पार्ट कहलाता है, उसको डायरेक्टरी बोलते हैं. तो एक ही अगर टॉपिक स्टेटमेंट हो, लेकिन अगर डायरेक्टरी बदल जाएगा तो पूरे क्वेश्चन का डायरेक्शन बदल जाएगा. अब अंकुर आस्क मी द क्वेश्चन की जब फर्स्ट वन इलेबोरेट द स्टेटमेंट. So are they in a position to answer this question or do they need some help? My students, be fast. Please be fast. Are you in a position to answer this question? Try this question. Actually, here I am giving you the clue. Lord Dalhousie, basically, here I have to make you clue about the British modernization. Did British modernize India? If someone is going to ask you the question, did British modernize in India? You will use the term, yes, actually British did not modernize India, but it is true as the unintended impact of the British rule is the modernization. India was modernized and it was as the result of the unintended impact. British intention was not to modernize India. So what sort of modernization occurred in India? So that is called colonial modernization. For example, you can say with their own purpose they built railways and telegraph. Okay, you know, they introduced English education. They introduced the Macaulay legal system, etc. So all were introduced and British were taking them. For example, they introduced the individual ownership in land. They made the land sellable. They reformed the legal system. They introduced English education. They introduced modern transport and communication lines, all with colonial motive. But the after effect of these reforms was modernization of India in future. So it was the unintended impact of the British rule. मतलब ब्रिटिश ने हमको मॉडर्नाइज करना नहीं चाहा, बल्कि इंडिया नेचुरली मॉडर्नाइज हो गया, नेचुरली. और ये ब्रिटिश रूल के इम्पैक्ट के रूप में, मतलब अनइंटेंडेड, ब्रिटिश ने नहीं चाहा, अनइंटेंडेड इम्पैक्ट. मतलब यू कैन से जायज संतान है गरीबी और पिछड़ापन, और नाजायज संतान है विकास. Unintended impact of the British rule, you can say. In this question, what you people have to do, we have to talk about all the reforms. How to start the question? Better to start the question in the manner. Lord Dalhousie was not simply known for its policy of annexation, but also you can say also for the wide extent reforms works in India, work in India. And it was at this point, we have to make this point clear, although the objective of the reforms carried by Lord Dalhousie was guided by the objective of colonization, because Dalhousie worked for in the interest of the British industrial capitalism, whose objective was to create an India for an effective market for British manufactured goods. But it is true, in course of time, the impact of the reforms was modernization of India. So firstly, make this point clear in order to make the examiner aware about the fact that you know what type of modernization was done by Lord Dalhousie and what was its basic purpose. Then you have to talk about roads and canals he built, railways he built, telegraph, then Thomsonian education system. He welcomed even Wood's dispatch in India. So you people have to try this question, and whenever you find difficulty, you will ask me. Ankur, all is well? All are well? They are okay? They will try the question. My students, up today you will make a study of this diagram, because once again you came to financial phase. Now you have moved on financial phase. Here objective. Here the difference you will find, normally in the previous chapter you will find the objectives were basically the one objective, and that is economic. But here the two objectives. One is to open India for British capitalist investment. British capitalist investment, because now the capitalism reached up to financial phase. So capital was already accumulated in Britain, and this capital had to be invested in India, because the capital would require the better return from India. And the second one is to avert the situation of the Great Revolt of 1857, because 1857 virtually brought British to their knees in India, and the British rule was stand still for some time. The British learnt a lot of lesson from the Great Revolt of 1857, and its objective was don't allow such an event to occur again. So there you can say, to avert the situation of the Great Revolt of 1857 was the second one objective. Up here you find in fact this is the objective, and then different policy measures. For example, political policy, administrative policy, economic policy, social policy, cultural policy. So political policy, British Crown preferred the policy of indirect expansion in place of direct one. That is correct. To bring administrative reforms in the manner that government's grip over India could be strengthened without the antagonizing the people. Okay. Third, transfer of home charges from India to Britain, drain of wealth, rise of modern industries. That is correct. Fourth one, to follow the policy of non-intervention in social matters. And fifth one, to promote racial division first, then commercial. Actually, this commercial had to be eliminated. Commercial has been mistakenly there is fine commercial. Here the term should be cultural. It is a misprinting. Cultural division. No, sorry, not cultural, communal division. Sorry. Commercial division and communal. Communal. I will in the regular class, I will make you clear. Communal division. Then my students, you have to go through this study material, and then my students, you have to go through the pages, political policy, in the same pattern as there was the change of objectives. So all the policies were guided by the political objective. So go vertically, return to horizontal, and through the proper mix of vertical and horizontal, you have to carry the things. My students, for tomorrow, I am seeking pardon, because tomorrow I am some busy somewhere, so I could not attend your class for tomorrow. I will take your class day after tomorrow. So for tomorrow, I am just seeking leave from you people, and today this industrial phase has been finished and you are already having the material of this financial phase, then I will just see you the day after tomorrow. We have to go through that, and apart from that I have recommended some books and chapters. If you people are having the time for additional study, you can make the additional study. And very soon as geography is also likely to start, so you will not have problem, then 2 classes will move simultaneously. Okay my students, today I am stopping here. Thank you very much.